The red sun cast long shadows across the crystal plains of Kepler 442c, as Dr. Yuna knelt beside the strange metal structure protruding from the ground. Her scanner beeped softly, showing energy readings unlike anything in the galactic database. The mining crews had found this place 3 weeks ago while digging for rare minerals, but what they discovered was far more valuable than any crystal or ore. Commander Hyuk stood nearby, his hand resting on his sidearm as he watched the alien. Teamwork. The Vorthak archaeologist Veltar moved carefully around the structure, his forearms recording measurements while his large eyes studied every surface detail. The insect-like scholar had traveled from the far rim of the galaxy when news of the discovery reached the Galactic Council. The metal composition is unknown, Veltar announced in his clicking language, translated through everyone's communication devices. Carbon dating suggests this structure is at least 50,000 years old, possibly much older. General Crix, the massive reptilian Zenthari commander, snorted with displeasure. Ancient ruins mean ancient weapons. My ships stand ready if we find anything dangerous. His scaled hide reflected the red sunlight as he paced back and forth, clearly uncomfortable with the archaeological work. Yuna ran her fingers along the smooth metal surface, feeling strange markings carved into its side. The symbols looked familiar somehow, but she could not place where she had seen them before. As a human xenoarchaeologist, she had studied dozens of dead civilizations, but these markings were different. They seemed to call to something deep in her memory. Commander Hyuk, can you help me clear this section? She asked, pointing to an area where crystal formations had grown over part of the structure. Hyuk nodded and began carefully removing the crystals with his tools. As a military advisor, he was not trained for archaeological work, but his steady hands and attention to detail made him useful on digs like this. The other humans on the team often worked well together, something the aliens found interesting, but not unusual. The excavation had been going slowly for days. The structure appeared to be just the tip of something much larger buried beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating scans showed a vast complex extending deep into the planet's crust, with multiple levels and chambers that had been sealed for thousands of years. I am detecting movement in the lower chambers, announced the crystalline collective representative, its translucent form shimmering as it processed data through its internal networks. Something is still active down there after all this time. Veltar's antennae twitched with excitement. We must proceed carefully. If this civilization had technology that could function for 50 millennia, we are dealing with something far beyond our current understanding. As the team worked to clear more of the entrance, strange patterns began to emerge on the metal surface. The symbols seemed to form a story of sorts, showing figures that looked remarkably humanoid engaged in various activities. Some appeared to be operating advanced machinery, while others seemed to be in combat with creatures that looked nothing like any known species. These beings walked upright on 2 legs, Yuna observed, tracing the outline of one figure with her finger. They had 2 arms, a torso and a head positioned at the top, very similar to human physiology. Convergent evolution, Veltar explained. Many species develop similar body plans when they become intelligent tool users. It means nothing. But Hyuk was studying the images more closely, and something in his expression suggested he did not agree with the Vorthak scholar's easy dismissal. The human commander had seen many alien species during his military service, and these ancient figures looked more than just similar to humans. After several more hours of careful excavation, the team finally cleared enough of the entrance to reveal what appeared to be a doorway. The surface was covered in more of the strange symbols, arranged in patterns that suggested they might be some form of writing or instructions. I am reading massive energy signatures beyond this barrier, the crystalline being reported. Whatever power source they used, it is still functioning at nearly full capacity. General Crix ordered his soldiers to establish a defensive perimeter, while the archaeologists worked to understand the door mechanism. The Zenthari had brought a full military expedition to this remote planet, expecting to find ancient weapons they could study and possibly reverse engineer for their empire's use. Yuna found herself drawn to a particular section of symbols near what appeared to be the center of the door. As she touched them, they began to glow with a soft blue light, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated slightly. Everyone step back, Hayek ordered, his military training taking over. Unknown technology, activating. But instead of danger, what happened next was far more intriguing. The symbols on the door began to shift and change, rearranging themselves into new patterns. The blue light spread across the entire surface, and then the massive barrier simply dissolved, revealing a corridor that stretched into darkness. Cool air flowed out from the opening, carrying with it scents that were somehow familiar yet impossible to identify. Emergency lighting activated automatically along the corridor walls, showing a path that descended at a gentle angle into the buried complex. "Remarkable," whispered Veltar. "The technology responds to touch, and the systems are still fully operational. This civilization was incredibly advanced." The team entered the corridor slowly, with General Crix's soldiers taking point and the archaeologists following behind. The walls were covered in more of the strange symbols, but these seemed different. Somehow, they were larger and more elaborate, almost like artwork rather than simple writing. As they walked deeper into the complex, Yuna noticed that the symbols were telling a story. The first panels showed the humanoid figures in what appeared to be peaceful activities, building cities and creating art. But as the corridor continued, the images began to change. The figures were shown in conflict with other beings, wielding weapons and commanding vast fleets of ships. They were warriors, Hayek observed quietly, studying a panel that showed the humanoids in obvious military formation. Whatever these beings were, they knew how to fight. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with strange machinery that hummed with barely contained energy. Crystalline displays showed star maps and data streams in languages none of them could read, but the information was clearly still being processed and updated in real time. In the center of the chamber stood a raised platform with what appeared to be a control interface. As the team approached, the displays changed, showing images that made everyone stop in their tracks. The screens now showed space battles on a scale none of them had ever imagined. Fleets of thousands of ships engaged in combat across multiple star systems simultaneously. The humanoid figures commanded these fleets with tactics and strategies that seemed impossibly sophisticated, but most disturbing were the images of their enemies. Creatures of shadow and darkness that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space where planets had once orbited their stars. The ancient humanoids fought against these beings with weapons that could shatter moons and tear apart the fabric of space itself. "The Deathwalkers," Veltar whispered, reading text that had appeared below the images. That is what they called themselves. Suddenly, the central platform activated, and a holographic figure materialized above it. The being looked exactly like a human, but wore clothing and armor unlike anything from known human history. When it spoke, the words were translated automatically by their devices. "If you are seeing this message, then the Devourers have returned," the hologram said. "We tried to warn the galaxy, but they would not listen. We tried to fight alone, but the cost was too great. We chose exile over extinction, hoping that someday others would be ready to stand against the darkness." The hologram gestured toward the star map surrounding them. "We have prepared for this day. Our weapons are hidden, our warriors sleep, our knowledge waits. When the galaxy faces its darkest hour, the Deathwalkers will rise again." The message ended, and the chamber fell silent except for the humming of ancient machinery. The archaeological team stood in shocked silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Dr. Yuna and Commander Hayek exchanged glances, and something passed between them that the aliens did not notice. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding of something the others could not see. The discovery would change everything, but none of them yet understood just how personal this ancient mystery would become. 3 days after discovering the holographic message, the archaeological team had mapped most of the upper levels of the ancient complex. Each chamber revealed more mysteries about the civilization that had built this place. Advanced technology lined every wall, still functioning after thousands of years, but responding only to certain members of the team. Dr. Yuna found that the alien machinery seemed to recognize her touch more readily than it did the others. Panels that remained dark for Veltar or General Crix would light up immediately when she approached them. Commander Hyuk experienced the same phenomenon, though he tried to hide his surprise when it happened. The technology appears to have some form of genetic recognition system, Veltar theorized as he watched Yuna activate another control panel. Perhaps it responds to certain biological markers that you humans possess by coincidence. But it was becoming clear that this was more than coincidence. The deeper they went into the complex, the more the ancient system seemed designed specifically for human operation. Door handles were positioned at exactly the right height for human hands. Display screens appeared at eye level for someone of human stature. Even the atmospheric controls had automatically adjusted to provide oxygen at the precise mixture that humans needed to breathe comfortably. On the morning of the fourth day, they discovered the stasis chambers. The room was vast and circular, with hundreds of transparent pods arranged in concentric circles around a central control station. Most of the pods were dark and empty, but several dozen still glowed with the same blue energy that powered the rest of the facility. Life signs, the crystalline collective representative announced, its form flickering with excitement. These containers hold living beings in some form of suspended animation. General Crix immediately ordered his soldiers to surround the chamber, weapons ready. Ancient warriors could be incredibly dangerous if awakened. We should destroy them while they sleep. Absolutely not, Veltar protested, his forearms waving frantically. These beings could hold the key to understanding an entire lost civilization. The knowledge they possess could advance galactic science by centuries. Yuna approached one of the active pods, her scanner showing detailed readings of the being inside. What she saw made her heart race, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. The figure in the pod looked exactly like a human male, perhaps in his 30s, with features that could have belonged to any person she might meet on a human colony world. They look like humans, she said quietly, stating the obvious that everyone could see but no one wanted to acknowledge. Impossible, General Crix growled. Humans are a young species. Your people only achieved spaceflight a few thousand years ago. These beings predate your entire civilization. Commander Hyuk studied the control station at the center of the chamber, running his hands over symbols that seemed somehow familiar. What if we have it backwards? He suggested. What if humans are not a young species, but an old one that forgot its own history? The idea was too radical for the aliens to accept. Easily. According to all galactic records, humans had emerged from a single world and spread slowly through nearby systems, developing technology through trade and cooperation with other species. They were known as peaceful explorers and skilled diplomats, not as ancient warriors who had once dominated the galaxy. But the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. As Yuna activated more of the chamber's systems, historical records began displaying on the walls around them. Star charts showed human ships traveling between galaxies thousands of years before any other known species had achieved interstellar flight. Battle reports described conflicts on a scale that dwarfed anything in recorded galactic history. The hibernation systems are designed to maintain life indefinitely, Yuna reported as she studied the readouts. These beings have been sleeping for approximately 47,000 years. Veltar's scholarly excitement overcame his caution. We must awaken one of them. The knowledge they could share would be invaluable. Too dangerous, General Crix insisted. Ancient warriors with access to advanced weapons could threaten the entire galaxy. But the decision was taken out of their hands when one of the pods began to activate on its own. The blue glow intensified, and mechanisms within the chamber hummed to life. Warning signals flashed on displays throughout the room, though the text was in the same unknown language that covered everything in the complex. Someone is waking up, the crystalline being announced unnecessarily as they all watched the pod's transparent cover slide open. The man who sat up inside looked disoriented but alert. He appeared to be in perfect health despite having been unconscious for nearly 50,000 years. His eyes swept the chamber, taking in the mixed group of aliens and humans gathered around him, before settling on Yuna with obvious recognition. How long? He asked in perfect galactic standard, though with an accent none of them had heard before. 47,000 years, Yuna replied, her voice steady despite the momentous nature of the conversation. The man nodded, as if this was Not surprising news. I am Dr. Minho, senior researcher for the Human Colonial Authority. Are you the rescue team? The question hung in the air as everyone tried to process what they had just heard. This being claimed to be human, from an organization that did not exist in any galactic records, and he spoke as if he had been expecting someone to find him. There is no human colonial authority, General Crick stated flatly. Humans have never had an interstellar government of that size or scope. Dr. Minho looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned on his face. The memory wipe was more thorough than we planned, he said sadly. You truly do not remember who you were. He stood slowly, testing his muscles after the long hibernation. Despite his age, he moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to physical challenges. I need to speak with the other survivors. How many humans are in your expedition? Just 2, Commander Hyuk replied. Dr. Yuna and myself. Only 2? Dr. Minho looked alarmed. The colonies should have thousands by now. What happened to the expansion programs? Yuna and Hyuk exchanged glances, beginning to understand that this man expected a very different galaxy than the one he had awakened to find. Human expansion has been limited, Yuna explained carefully. We are members of the Galactic Council, but as a junior species. Most humans live on our homeworld or in small colonies. Dr. Minho sat down heavily, processing this information. Then it worked too well. We intended for humanity to forget its warrior past and embrace peace. But we never meant for you to forget your potential entirely. Another pod began to activate across the chamber, and then another. Within minutes, a dozen more beings were awakening from their long sleep. All appeared human, though they wore clothing and equipment unlike anything from known human worlds. The newly awakened humans moved with a coordination that impressed even General Crick's military eye. They assessed their situation quickly, established a defensive perimeter, and designated Dr. Minho as their spokesman, without any apparent communication between them. We are the last remnant of the human empire, Dr. Minho explained to the archaeological team. 47,000 years ago, we ruled most of this galaxy. Our fleets numbered in the millions. Our colonies covered 10,000 worlds, and our technology was so advanced that we could reshape solar systems at will. Veltar's translator struggled with some of the concepts Dr. Minho was describing. An empire of that size and power was beyond anything the current galaxy had ever imagined possible. What happened to it all? Yuna asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. The Devourers returned, Dr. Minho replied grimly. The same enemy that threatens the galaxy today. We fought them for 1,000 years, and we won. But the cost was so terrible that humanity decided it could never again be trusted with such power. One of the other awakened humans, a woman who introduced herself as Captain Ji-Wan, stepped forward. We were soldiers once, explorers and conquerors who spread across the stars. But war changed us in ways that frightened even ourselves. We became too good at destruction, too comfortable with violence. So we chose exile, Dr. Minho continued. We scattered our people across distant worlds, gave them new identities and false histories. We destroyed our weapons and hid our technology. Most of all, we erased the memories of what we had been, hoping that future generations of humans would grow up peaceful and innocent. The archaeological team listened in stunned silence as the ancient humans described a galaxy-spanning civilization that had voluntarily erased itself from history. The idea was so radical that even the open-minded Veltar had trouble accepting it. Some of us volunteered to remain in stasis, Captain Ji-Wan explained, waiting for the day when the Devourers would return and the galaxy would need warriors again. We hoped it would never happen, but we prepared for the worst. General Crick had been unusually quiet during these revelations, but now he stepped forward aggressively. Even if this story is true, which I doubt, what makes you think the galaxy needs ancient human warriors? We have advanced technology and powerful fleets. Dr. Minho looked at the Zenthari commander with something that might have been pity. Because you have never faced the Devourers. They consume not just worlds, but the very essence of life itself. Traditional weapons and tactics are useless again. The alarms echoed through the ancient complex as everyone stared at the displays showing the approaching threat. The organic ships moved through space in ways that defied physics, bending around, gravity wells, and appearing to phase through solid matter when it suited them. Even more disturbing was how they consumed everything they touched, leaving empty void where planets and asteroids had existed moments before. "How many ships?" "Captain," Ji-won asked, her demeanor instantly shifting from confused awakened sleeper to military commander. "Initial scans show approximately 200 vessels, the crystalline being reported, its translucent form flickering rapidly as it processed data. But the numbers keep changing. They appear to be multiplying as they consume matter. General." Crix was already shouting orders to his subordinates through his communication device. "All Zenthari fleets to battle stations. Prepare the stellar defense network. These creatures will not reach our core worlds." Dr. Minho watched the tactical displays with grim familiarity. "The Zenthari fleet will be destroyed within hours," he said matter-of-factly. "The Devourers do not fight like any enemy you have encountered before. Our ships are the most advanced in the galaxy," General Crix snarled. "Our weapons can crack planets. Our shields have never been penetrated by any known force." "The Devourers are not a known force," Captain Ji-won replied. "They exist partially outside normal space-time. Your energy weapons will pass harmlessly through them while they tear your ships apart from the inside." The first battle reports began arriving within the hour. The Zenthari advance fleet had engaged the Devourer ships at the system's outer rim, confident in their superior firepower and tactical doctrine. The engagement lasted exactly 17 minutes before all contact was lost. "Impossible," General Crix whispered as he watched the tactical displays. "The 5th Battle Fleet was my finest squadron. They had enough firepower to level a moon." On the screens they could see the aftermath of the battle. Where the Zenthari ships had been, only empty space remained. The Devourer vessels had grown, larger and more numerous, as if they had absorbed not just the ships but everything that made them functional, including their crews and their knowledge. "They learn from everything they consume," Dr. Minho explained as he studied the readings. "Every tactic you use against them, every weapon design, every strategic innovation becomes part of their collective knowledge. Fighting them conventionally only makes them stronger." Veltar's forearms trembled as he processed this information. Then how can they be defeated at all? If they absorb all knowledge and grow stronger with each victory, they should be invincible. "They are not invincible," Captain Ji-won said firmly. "But defeating them requires tactics and weapons that we spent 1,000 years developing. More importantly, it requires a willingness to sacrifice everything, including your own humanity, to ensure victory." More reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Devourers had not appeared only in this system, but simultaneously in dozens of locations. Major trade routes were being severed as entire star systems went dark. Refugee ships fled in panic toward the galactic core, bringing tales of worlds consumed so completely that even their gravity wells disappeared. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, and Dr. Yuna found herself appointed as humanity's representative due to her first-hand contact with the awakened ancients. She stood before beings from hundreds of species, all demanding answers about threats they could not understand. "The humans claim these creatures can be defeated," announced Council Leader Mordun, his crystalline form resonating with barely controlled fear. "But they offer no proof, only stories from beings who have slept for 50,000 years. Commander." Yuk had remained unusually quiet during the presentations, but now he stepped forward. "Perhaps it is time for the Council to know the full truth about humanity's current capabilities." The statement sent ripples of confusion through the assembled delegates. Humanity was known as a peaceful species with limited military capabilities. Their ships were primarily designed for exploration and trade, not warfare. But Hayuk activated a secure communication channel that should not have existed according to any galactic records. Within moments, responses came from across the galaxy. Hidden facilities that had been disguised as research stations revealed themselves as fortress worlds. Peaceful human colonies activated defense systems that rivaled anything the major powers possessed. Most shocking of all, human fleet elements that were supposedly scattered across dozens of systems began coordinating with military precision that impressed even the Zenthari observers. "We never forgot," Hayek said quietly. "We hid our true nature, buried our weapons, and pretended to be harmless explorers. But we always remembered what we might need to become again." On the main display, a star chart showed the true scope of human presence in the galaxy. They were not a small species confined to a few dozen worlds, but a vast network that had quietly spread to thousands of systems while maintaining the appearance of peaceful expansion. Admiral Taeyang appeared on the communication screen, transmitting from what had been thought to be a civilian research vessel. "All human assets are now active and coordinating for defense operations. We have maintained operational readiness for exactly this scenario." The aliens in the council chamber stared in shock as they realized that humanity had been planning for this day for thousands of years. The peaceful explorers and skilled diplomats they thought they knew had been a carefully maintained deception. "How many ships?" General Frakes demanded, his military mind trying to process the strategic implications. "Enough," Admiral Taeyang replied simply. "More importantly, we have weapons specifically designed to fight enemies that exist partially outside normal space-time." Dr. Minho stepped forward to address the council directly. "The Devourers can only be defeated through tactics that most species would consider morally unacceptable. You must be willing to sacrifice entire systems as bait, to use the enemy's strengths against them, and to accept casualties on a scale that will haunt your people for generations." "What choice do we have?" Council Leader Morden asked desperately. "If these creatures cannot be stopped, they will consume the entire galaxy." "You have two choices," Captain G1 announced. "You can attempt to fight them with conventional means and face certain extinction within months. Or you can authorize humanity to wage war as we did 47,000 years ago, knowing that the humans who emerge victorious will not be the same peaceful people you have known." The debate that followed lasted for hours, with species representatives arguing about trust, authority, and the dangers of unleashing ancient human military capabilities. Some delegates worried that a victorious humanity might prove as dangerous to the galaxy as the Devourers themselves. But the decision was ultimately made by events rather than words. Reports arrived that the Crystalline Collective's homeworld had been completely consumed, along with all 17 billion beings who lived there. The Vorthak core systems were under direct assault, with their primary shipyards already destroyed. Even the mighty Zenthari Empire was losing territory faster than they could organize evacuations. The galaxy authorizes humanity to take whatever actions are necessary to stop this threat, Council Leader Mordoon announced with obvious reluctance. "But we expect detailed reports on all military operations and immediate cessation of hostilities once the Devourers are defeated." Dr. Minho and Captain Jiwan exchanged glances that the aliens did not understand. They had fought the Devourers before, and they knew that victory would require tactics and weapons that would forever change how the galaxy viewed humanity. "Understood," Admiral Taeyang responded from his hidden fleet. "All human forces are now transitioning to full military operations. Recommend immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from border systems." As the council session ended, Yuna found herself walking beside Commander Hayek through the corridors of the ancient complex. The displays on the walls now showed real-time tactical information from across the galaxy, revealing the true scope of the Devourer invasion. "Were you always military?" she asked quietly. "We all were," Hayek replied. "Every human in space service has combat training, whether they know it or not. We have been preparing for this day since our species first left its homeworld. The peaceful facade was ending, and the galaxy was about to discover why humans had once been called the Death Walkers. The question was whether anyone would survive to remember the lesson." Deep in the complex, more stasis pods were activating automatically, awakening warriors who had slept through the rise and fall of entire civilizations. They emerged with weapons and knowledge that had been deliberately forgotten, ready to wage a war that would either save the galaxy or damn it to darkness. The Devourers had returned, but they would soon learn that their ancient enemy had been waiting for them, hiding among the peaceful species they sought to consume. The Deathwalkers were awakening, and the galaxy would never be the same as them. Only human. Within 24 hours of the Galactic Council's authorization, the transformation began. Across thousands of worlds that had seemed peacefully human for millennia, the true nature of humanity's presence revealed itself. Research stations shed their civilian disguises to reveal weapon foundries that had been operating in secret for generations. Agricultural colonies activated orbital defense platforms that had been hidden beneath the surface. Most disturbing of all, the humans themselves began to change. General Daehyun emerged from what had been listed in galactic records as a botanical research facility on the rim world of Kepler 438b. His civilian clothes had been replaced by armor that incorporated technology the aliens had never seen before. When he spoke to the assembled alien observers, his voice carried an authority that made even veteran Zenthari commanders stand at attention. Humanity has maintained operational security for 3,000 years, he announced to the mixed alien and human forces gathering at the makeshift command center. Every human child learns basic tactical doctrine as part of their education. Every human adult completes military service before being allowed to travel to other worlds. What you have seen as peaceful exploration was actually the largest military expansion in galactic history. The scope of the deception was staggering. Human diplomats revealed themselves as intelligence officers who had been gathering strategic information about every major species for centuries. Human traders had been mapping supply lines and defensive capabilities throughout the galaxy. Human researchers had been developing weapons specifically designed to counter the military doctrines of their supposed allies. Commander Yunji stepped forward to brief the alien military leaders who had remained to coordinate with human forces. Her previously unassuming research vessel had transformed into a command ship, bristling with weapon systems that defied several fundamental laws of physics. The Devourers cannot be fought with conventional tactics, she explained, displaying holographic projections of the enemy ships. They exist partially outside normal space-time, which makes them immune to most energy weapons and allows them to phase through physical barriers. Standard military doctrine is not just useless against them, it actually makes them stronger by providing new knowledge and resources to absorb. General Crick studied the tactical displays with growing unease. Then how do you propose to fight them? By using their strengths against them, replied a new voice from the chamber entrance. The being who entered looked human but moved with a fluid grace that suggested extensive physical and mental conditioning. He wore simple robes that contrasted sharply with the military uniforms around him. This is Wonho, General Daehyun explained. Former human battle coordinator now serving as strategic advisor. He participated in the original Devourer War 47,000 years ago before entering voluntary exile. Wonho approached the tactical displays with obvious reluctance, as if the very act of engaging with military planning caused him pain. The Devourers feed on order and structure. They consume organized matter and convert it to their purposes. But they cannot process chaos, cannot absorb pure entropy. Explain, demanded General Crix. We will give them exactly what they expect to find, Wonho said grimly. Organized fleets, defensive positions, strategic resources, but everything we show them will be designed to collapse into chaos at precisely the right moment. We will feed them poisoned information and corrupted resources that will turn their own absorption abilities against them. The strategy that emerged over the following days was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human forces began what appeared to be desperate defensive actions, falling back from system after system, while the Devourers consumed everything in their path. To alien observers, it looked like humanity was being systematically defeated despite all their hidden preparations. But the retreats were carefully orchestrated. Every abandoned facility had been rigged with quantum destabilizers that would detonate only after being partially absorbed by Devourer ships. Every evacuated colony left behind databases filled with false information designed to confuse enemy tactical systems. Most importantly, every system that fell contained hidden human volunteers who allowed themselves to be consumed, carrying with them knowledge that would prove toxic to the Devourer collective consciousness. Admiral Minji coordinated the space, battles from her flagship, a vessel that had spent decades disguised as a merchant hauler, but now revealed itself as one of the most advanced warships ever constructed. Her crew moved with frightening efficiency, implementing tactics that would have horrified the same aliens who now depended on them for survival. Devourer fleet entering the Tau Ceti system, reported her tactical officer. 17 vessels, approximately 4 times larger than when they first appeared. Perfect, Admiral Minji replied coldly. Signal the volunteer squadrons to begin their approach. What followed was a battle that burned itself into the memories of every witness. Human pilots flew their ships directly into the Devourer vessels, not as desperate suicide attacks but as precisely calculated delivery systems. Each ship carried specially designed payloads that would not activate until they were fully integrated into the enemy's organic structure. The aliens watching from safely distant observation posts saw human after human sacrifice themselves with a calmness that was more terrifying than any display of rage or desperation. These were not soldiers, driven by fear or hatred, but professionals implementing a strategy they had spent lifetimes perfecting. How can they do this? Whispered Veltar as he watched entire squadrons disappear into the Devourer ships. How can they sacrifice their own people so easily? Commander Yunji answered, without taking her eyes off the tactical displays. Because we understand what we are fighting for. Every human who dies today does so knowing that their sacrifice will save billions of others. We do not waste lives, but we do not hesitate to spend them when the mathematics of survival demand it. The results of these tactics began to show within hours. Devourer ships that had consumed human vessels started to malfunction, their organic hulls developing patterns that looked almost like cancer. The false information embedded in human databases caused enemy fleets to make strategic errors that human forces were perfectly positioned to exploit. But the most effective weapon was something the aliens could barely comprehend. Human volunteers had allowed themselves to be absorbed by the Devourer collective consciousness, carrying with them not just false information, but pure human emotion and determination. The Devourers were a hive mind that had never encountered individual consciousness strong enough to maintain its identity within their collective structure. Master strategist Seojun revealed this aspect of their plan during a briefing with alien military leaders. The Devourers absorb knowledge and adapt to tactics, but they have never faced an enemy that could fight from inside their own consciousness. Every human they consume becomes a virus in their collective mind, spreading doubt and individual thought where only unity should exist. The psychological warfare was beyond anything the aliens had imagined possible. Humans were literally infecting the enemy with humanity, using their own capacity for independent thought as a weapon against creatures that depended on collective consciousness for their strength. As the war progressed, the galaxy began to see why humans had once been called the Deathwalkers. They did not fight with honor or glory, but with a cold calculation that treated every life as a resource to be spent wisely. They used enemy strengths against them with tactics that bordered on the impossible. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to genuinely enjoy the intellectual challenge of defeating an enemy that everyone else considered unbeatable. Fleet Coordinator Minji implemented strategies that required her to sacrifice entire colonies as bait, knowing that the false databases and corrupted resources left behind would cause more damage to the enemy than the colonies could have provided if defended. She made these decisions without hesitation, her only concern being whether the sacrifice would achieve maximum tactical advantage. The aliens who witnessed these operations began to understand why humanity had chosen exile after their last victory. The humans who were emerging to fight the Devourers were not the peaceful explorers and skilled diplomats the galaxy had known. They were something far more dangerous, beings who had learned to weaponize every aspect of their nature, including their own capacity for sacrifice and their enemies' expectations of defeat. Are we making the right choice? Council Leader Mordun asked Dr. Yuna during one of their coordination meetings. These humans who are saving us, will they be willing to return to peace when the war is over? Yuna looked at the tactical displays, showing human forces across the galaxy, each one implementing strategies that would have been considered war crimes if used against any enemy other than the Devourers. I do not know, she admitted. But I know what will happen if we lose this war, and that is a certainty I cannot accept. The Deathwalkers had returned, and they were everything the ancient legends had claimed them to be. The question was no, longer whether they could defeat the Devourers, but whether the galaxy would survive the humans who saved it. The final battle began 6 months after the Devourers first appeared, when human forces had traced the enemy back to their source. The Devourer home cluster was a nightmare of consumed worlds twisted together into a single massive entity that existed partially outside normal space. Billions of absorbed civilizations formed a collective consciousness so vast that it could process the resources of entire galaxies simultaneously. Fleet Admiral Hyunwoo commanded the assault from his flagship, a vessel that incorporated technology from the ancient human archives combined with innovations developed during months of desperate warfare. Around him, the largest military fleet in galactic history prepared for an operation that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. Final count shows 2 million human vessels ready for assault, reported Tactical Coordinator Subin from her position at the navigation station. Allied forces number approximately 300,000 ships from all remaining galactic species. The difference in fleet sizes revealed how thoroughly humanity had hidden their true capabilities. For thousands of years they had maintained the appearance of being a minor spacefaring species while secretly building the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Chae-young worked frantically at her science station, analyzing the final data from human volunteers who had allowed themselves to be absorbed by the Devourer collective. "The corruption virus is working," she announced. "Individual consciousness is spreading through their hive mind faster than they can contain it. But the process is also making them more desperate and unpredictable." The Devourers had begun to understand what humanity was doing to them. The false information and toxic knowledge they had absorbed was causing their collective consciousness to fracture into competing thoughts and conflicting goals. For the first time in their existence, they were experiencing doubt, fear, and individual desire for survival. "They are trying to purge the human influence from their consciousness," Dr. Chae-young continued, "but the process is destroying much of their accumulated knowledge. They are becoming weaker but also more likely to make random and dangerous decisions." Colonel Jae-hyun led the ground assault teams that would attempt to penetrate the Devourer home cluster's core. His forces consisted entirely of volunteers who understood that this would be a one-way mission. The goal was not survival, but to deliver the final weapon directly to the heart of the enemy collective consciousness. "Remember," he told his troops during the final briefing, "we are not trying to destroy the Devourers through superior firepower. We are going to give them something they cannot absorb or process. We are going to show them what it means to be truly human." The weapon they carried was not technological, but psychological. It was a concentrated dose of human memory and emotion, containing the experiences of every person who had ever lived, loved, struggled, and died as an individual, rather than as part of a collective. The Devourers could absorb knowledge and adapt to tactics, but they had never encountered anything like pure human consciousness in its most concentrated form. The battle itself was unlike anything ever recorded in galactic military history. Human. Ships employed tactics that seemed designed to maximize their own casualties while inflicting minimal apparent damage on the enemy. They allowed themselves to be absorbed by Devourer vessels, only to detonate weapons that existed partially outside normal space-time, tearing holes in reality itself. Allied forces watched in horror and amazement as human commanders sacrificed entire fleets to achieve tactical positions that seemed insignificant. Admiral Hyunwoo destroyed his own supply lines to prevent the Devourers from absorbing the resources, then ordered his ships to continue fighting even when they lacked fuel or ammunition. "Human fleet elements are operating beyond all known endurance limits," reported the Crystalline Collective Observer assigned to monitor the battle. "Their casualty rates exceed 90% in most engagements, yet they continue to maintain operational effectiveness." The answer lay in something the aliens could barely understand. Humans were not just fighting as individuals, but as representatives of every generation that had ever lived. Each pilot carried the memories of ancestors stretching back to the species' origins, and each soldier fought not just for their own survival, but for the continuation of human consciousness itself. Young pilot Subin exemplified this dedication when her squadron was assigned to deliver the final psychological weapon to the Devourer core. She knew the mission was impossible, that no ship could survive the journey through the twisted space at the heart of the enemy cluster. "All squadrons, this is Subin," she announced over the communication channels as her ship began its final approach. "We carry with us the dreams and memories of every human who ever lived. Today we give the Devourers something they cannot consume or control. Today we show them what individual consciousness truly means." Her ship and dozens of others disappeared into the organic structure of the Devourer home cluster, carrying with them the concentrated essence of human experience. The psychological weapon they delivered was not designed to kill, but to overwhelm the collective consciousness with individual thoughts and emotions it could not process or integrate. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourer Collective. Consciousness, which had successfully absorbed the knowledge and resources of thousands of species, found itself flooded with human memories that refused to blend into the greater whole. Individual thoughts and personal emotions spread like wildfire through their shared mind, creating chaos where there had once been perfect unity. Dr. Chae-young monitored the process from the flagship, watching as readings showed the Devourer Collective, consciousness fragmenting into billions of individual entities. "They are experiencing individual awareness for the first time," she reported with amazement. "The collective is dissolving because each absorbed consciousness is remembering what it was like to be separate." The dissolution of the Devourer collective consciousness caused physical changes in their ships and installations. The organic vessels that had seemed so powerful began to break apart as the unified will that held them together fragmented into competing desires. The home cluster itself started to collapse as individual components tried to move in different directions simultaneously. But victory came at a cost that would haunt the galaxy for generations. Human casualties exceeded 70% of all participating forces. Entire bloodlines had been wiped out in the final assault. The humans who survived were forever changed by what they had experienced and what they had been forced to do to achieve victory. Fleet Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, watching the remains of the Devourer home cluster drift apart like a dying organism. Around him, the surviving members of his crew worked with the mechanical efficiency of beings who had seen too much destruction to feel relief at their survival. "Total casualty reports are still coming in," reported the communications officer, her voice devoid of emotion. "Preliminary estimates suggest we have lost approximately 14 million personnel across all human forces." The number represented nearly half of humanity's total military population. Families across the galaxy would be mourning losses that could never be replaced. The human species had paid the ultimate price for victory, sacrificing their own future to ensure that the galaxy would have one. President Hanul addressed the Galactic Council from the ruins of what had once been the Devourer home cluster. Behind, her human ships worked to establish a monitoring station that would watch for any signs of the enemy's return. The work was being carried out by beings who moved like ghosts, their eyes holding memories that would never fade. "The Devourer threat has been eliminated," she announced to the assembled representatives. "But the humans who achieved this victory are not the same people who began this war. We have been forced to become something that frightens even ourselves." The aliens in the council chamber listened in uncomfortable silence. They had witnessed human military capabilities that exceeded their worst nightmares. And now they had to decide how to coexist with a species that had proven itself capable of sacrificing everything for victory. Ambassador Isul worked tirelessly, in the months that followed, to establish new relationships between humanity and the other galactic species. The challenge was immense as fear and gratitude warred in the hearts of beings who owed their survival to humans they could no longer fully understand or trust. "We do not wish to rule the galaxy," she explained repeatedly in diplomatic sessions, "but we also cannot pretend to be the harmless explorers you once knew. The war has shown us what we are capable of, and we cannot forget that knowledge." The solution that emerged was unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity would remain as guardians against existential threats, maintaining the military capabilities necessary to protect the galaxy from enemies like the Devourers. But they would also work to ensure that such capabilities would never again be necessary. Elder Council member Borum advocated for a different approach, arguing that humanity should return to hiding and allow the galaxy to forget what they had witnessed. We chose exile once before because we understood that our nature frightens others, she reminded the human leadership. Perhaps it is time to make that choice again.